Wait a minute, what am I doing? Which one am I doing? Oh. Hey Booktube, it's Kim at middle of the book march. This is my tag for this week. I have a very small backlog of tags in my watch later section of Booktube, and I've talked about this briefly before. I eliminated a bunch of them because they were either season related or timely, and I hadn't gotten to them for so long. Other ones I didn't have anything to contribute, so I have 4 tags in my file. This is one of them, and this is the Name Game book tag. I was tagged by Bethann Bruninga Sokolar. I hope I pronounced that right, Bethann. And she tagged me months ago. The original tag is from KimberleysBookNook. No, not me. It's a channel that's no longer active on Booktube. But Bethann tagged me, and I thought at the time, this is a really cool tag, and here I am months later finally getting to it. All it basically is you spell out your name in books. And my name is typically short, it's Kim, but it stands for Kimberly, which is much longer. So I am going to use my full given name of Kimberly with an L-Y. So there's 8 letters, I have 8 books. And what I've done is I started going through the books that I have, and I started to pick out books based on their titles. And I found that I wasn't getting what I wanted out of the books that I had read. So I am doing this based on the author's last name. So I hope that counts. And all I'm basically going to do is show you a book that their author last name begins with the letter that makes up my first name. And I'll tell you about these books. They're all books that I've read. And I have mostly, I don't know if it's half and half or not, but it's a combination of fiction and nonfiction. So let's go. The letter K is the first letter in my name, and the author in the book I'm going to show you is Elizabeth Kostova, The Shadowland. She is the author of The Historian. It's kind of a literary vampire tale in the genre of literary vampire horror, whatever you want to call it, which I've also read and really enjoyed. This one is a much different tone of a book, but also very good. It's kind of a complex narrative with a lot of generational secrets and historical secrets that come to light. The basic premise is Alexandra Boyd is a young American woman who's traveling in Bulgaria, Sofia, Bulgaria. And she's in a cab and she's helping an elderly couple with their bags, and eventually comes to realize as they leave the cab and the cab drives off that they've left one of their bags behind, that she's in possession of it. And when she opens it, she realizes there's an urn with human remains in the bag. There's also a name engraved on it, and so her goal through the book is to find this couple, to find this family. And in that search, she comes upon all kinds of people, stories, secrets, histories, and it comes to a point where she's in some danger. So it's kind of a literary mystery, very atmospheric for the European region of Bulgaria, and it was a very enjoyable book. So, and I read The Historian as well. Her books, these books anyway, this one is in paperback. It's kind of chunky, but it's very good. And The Historian is the same way. The second letter is I, and the next author is, who I believe is the only male author in my pile. But this is John Irving, and this particular book is A Widow for 1 Year. This is one of his many, many books. This was published in, and preparation is everything, 1998. This is the story of Ruth Cole. It's kind of a multi-generational history and story of her. The book starts when she's 4 years old, and that is in 1958. Second window into Ruth's life is the fall of 1990, where she's a young unmarried woman, and the last part of it is in 1995 when she is a 41-year-old widow, and all of that information is on the blurb. I read this a while ago. I don't remember if I just spoiled anything. But I really enjoyed this one, and John Irving has always historically been one of my favorites, but I haven't read one of his books in a very long time, so I could go back and read it now and hate it. I don't know. But at the time, I really enjoyed this book, and he's hit or miss. He's got some real duds out there. But this one at the time was one of the ones I really liked. Prayer for Owen Meany, The Cider House Rules, Garp is my all-time favorite. But this is the story of a woman who is trying to get through life as labeled as being difficult instead of being a nice girl. And it talks about her life. She goes into a literary career and her experiences and relationships with men. So it was very good. I really enjoyed that one. Let's see. Here's my first nonfiction. This is The Address Book by Deirdre Mask. And I read this with Heidi from My Reading Life and Noelle the Book Rook. This was really very good, and it was completely different than what we were expecting. I was expecting a book talking about U.S. addresses and the kind of the process or the conventions that we go through in our addresses. I also thought it was going to be talking about real estate and redlining and racial disparity in real estate transactions, that type of thing. And it is somewhat, but this covers international scope. It talks about how people are recorded and how their addresses are recorded in India, in Japan, in Europe, in different parts of the U.S. It talks about addresses in New York City with high-rises and how many addresses can be bought. It talks about homelessness. It's an exceptionally good book, and it was fascinating, and I blew through it. It took me by complete surprise because I wasn't expecting that type of narrative nonfiction, and it's really good. You should read that. The next letter is B, and this one is a novel. The author's name is Anita Brookner, who I am a giant fan of, and this particular book is Fraud. I have always been an Anita Brookner fan, and this book was brought to my In Real Life book group years ago as our selection, which we all voted to read. And I think I almost got into a fist fight because I really loved this book and almost nobody else liked it. They thought it was horrible. There was one other book group member who liked it, but I really loved it. And I came to love Anita Brookner's writing. This is the story of Anna Durant, and she is a single woman of probably entering middle age, and she disappears from her London flat, but nobody notices until 4 months later. And she's the character that Brookner is an expert at writing about, whether it's a single woman of a certain age. I think that phrase appears on, of a certain age, and that appears on the back cover. But Brookner is expert at writing about these types of women, single women, women who are putting on a fraudulent face to give to the public, but who are really very different in their introvert life. And I just loved it. I love how she writes. I love her characters, the quiet and the silence and the not mania, but the anxiety of these lonely people. And I really loved this book. I don't remember how many books Anita Brookner has published. But this one was published in 1992. I really liked it. So after B comes E. And this was one of my favorites of last year. I read it last year. It won the 2019 Booker Prize. And it's Margaret Atwood's The Testaments. No, it isn't. I hated that book. It sucked. This one is Bernadine Evaristo, Girl, Woman, Other. That was my lame attempt at humor. I loved this book, and I was so pissed off that this was not the singular winner of the 2019 Booker Prize. I ranted all last year after the prize was awarded, or not last year, but all the end of 2019, and part of last year, because that's when I read it. I love this book, and this is a compilation of the stories of multiple different women, queer women, non-binary people, all different groups of people that are somehow connected with one character or another. It reads somewhat similarly to a short story collection, but you can see the connections, and they're fairly deep. You see from one section to the next who knows who, and how those people are tied together, what the relationships are. I loved the writing. I love her writing. There's very little punctuation and no capitals and quotations. It's an interesting writing format that doesn't work for everybody. I thought it was brilliant, and I loved it. What am I up to next? R. I'm up to R. I can spell my name. This one is another nonfiction. Well, it's kind of, well, I don't know if you would describe something like this as nonfiction. It's poetry and mixed media. It is Claudia Rankine's Citizen, an American Lyric. I read this last year as well, and this is brilliant. I actually listened to this on audio because much of this is poetry and spoken word art. But then I found this copy, I think, at a super bargain price. It may have been even at a library sale, and I picked it up and was grateful that I did, because there were so many pictures and formats in here that I would have missed had I just relied on the audio and left it at that. Let me see if I can find, there's another photo, and the book is formatted in a really interesting way. It's a combination of illustrations, photos, poetry. There's a lot of white space because there's a lot of commentary, and then this white space on the page for the reader, at least for me, that's reflection time, because after a lot of these pieces, I had to just kind of stop reading and just stop and think about what I just heard and what I just read. So this is an exceptional book. If you haven't read it, if you haven't listened to it, I would suggest doing both at the same time, because when you hear the audio, it's really powerful. Okay, I am up, almost done. I'm up to L. And this one is Ariel Levy, Female Chauvinist Pigs, Women in the Rise of Raunch Culture. And I did this as a buddy read with Britta Bowler. When did we do this, Britta? Earlier this year? I don't remember. The end of last year? I don't remember. It doesn't matter when. It just matters that I did. I read it. This is, again, nonfiction essay collection about young women and raunch culture. Over time, where has feminism come so that young women are using sex and sexuality as means of power? And is that really female power? What does that say about our culture? What does it say that women have come to rely on these things to prove the power they have and the sway they have in the media, in the marketplace, in business, and in culture in general? So it was really interesting, maddening at times, but it's a good read, and definitely brings up a lot of discussion. The last one is Why. And nobody's going to be surprised, and you're not going to need me to describe this book, but this is Hanya Yanagihara's A Little Life. I don't remember when I read it, but I keep saying that, and I don't know why I have to tell you guys when I read it. I did read it. All of these books I read. There. Okay. I really like this book. When I finished it, I went between a 4 and a 5 star, and I go back and forth and back and forth. I think I landed on 4. I don't remember. The writing, it's not perfect writing. It's exceptional writing for me. It was a little long, but what she does expertly is she gave you the backstory of so many of these characters. This is a group of 4 men who went to college together and all became the friend group that this book centers around. The main character is Jude, who we learn from his backstory was traumatically abused by other men and by monks, religious people. He was abandoned as a child, I believe. Yes, he was abandoned and found by this order of monks. And at first they took care of him, but it in such a sordid way went into a depraved situation of years of traumatic abuse. And I shouldn't even say traumatic abuse. All abuse is traumatic. But that was his childhood. And it describes things that happened to him, a car accident, a physical disability, and the whole book centers around this group of 4 best friends. It is brutal to read. It's been described as trauma porn, and I can see where people would think that, but it's also, I heard somebody say this is also a book about love, and it truly is. The feelings that these 4 friends have for each other and how they care for each other, build each other up, and get each other to the next point in life. Without the 4 of them together, many of these characters would not have made it as long as they did. And by the end of the book, we relearn what happens to each of them. And it was such a great... This book is one of the best character studies I've read in contemporary novels. It's very well done. And I thought their stories were just so compelling, and I just didn't want to put the book down. So those are my 8 books that spell out the name Kimberly based on those authors' last names. If you've read any of them, let me know in the comments down below or what your thoughts were. If you haven't and you're excited to, if any of them are on your TBRs, let me know. I've never said this before, I don't think, but if you've read some of these books and absolutely hate them, write me that too. Tell me why. And we don't all have to like the same books, but I love it when people say, oh, I read that one, I thought it was awful, and here's why. I like that. It promotes discussion and opens conversation. So let me know in the comments below anything you want to tell me. Thanks for watching the video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye, everybody.